Good evening, everybody. Welcome to day 2 of Funkfest at Home, the third Funkfest that we've done with Abbeydale Brewery, but the first that's had this sort of format. Today is a particularly weird day in this year of absolute weirdness, but we thought, we're here, we've all got the beers, we've not been able to have the festival that we necessarily wanted to have this year, so let's not at least let Boris put us off sharing a few beers together of a Saturday evening. So I'll just quickly introduce you to the two brewers that we've got with us this evening. So this is Jim Rangeley, who's the head brewer of our Funk Dungeon project at Abbeydale Brewery, and we've also got Brett Moore joining us from London Brewery as well. So Jim, do you want to do a quick intro to the beers that we're doing this evening and the festival concept?
So, as Laura said, the festival this year is all online, and it's got the changes that we kind of wanted. And well, got these changes that we're having to do in these unprecedented times. So we're kind of trying to do a lot of these, or a few of these talks over the internet. We were intending to have some special beers pouring at some pubs around the country, and both in Sheffield and further afield. Granted, in Sheffield, with the restrictions, those pubs that we would probably have worked with have decided to close, which is completely fair enough. We will still be doing some events with them, as we did last year as part of the festival fringe events. We will be doing them as and when the pubs reopen. So with the Crow in Sheffield, we were planning to redo our Berliner Weisse event, where they make some syrups and we pour a Berliner Weisse. So that will still happen at some point, again, when we're all safe and allowed to do so. We were always going to change up the festival slightly, because for those who've been to our brewery and came over the past couple of years, you've seen how the brewery's changed and how the festival has shifted around in its space. Currently, the space that we did have the majority of the festival in is now the dry store. So it's got barrel stock and empty cans, and doesn't really have space for anything, let alone an event. So we're always going to change up the festival slightly, not quite to this extent, but here we are. So yeah, this today, specifically this evening, we're looking at the Cool Ship releases and the collaboration brew that we did at the beer festival in September last year. We started with London Beer Factory using their mobile Cool Ship, which is the first beer, or the first beer that we're going to talk about.
Yeah. So yeah, but if anybody's got a hold of their bottle, if you want to crack it open.
That is also the first beer ever released from the mobile Cool Ship.
Nice.
You guys beat us to it.
When are you planning on releasing yours from?
We're in no rush, to be honest. We might wait till we have some 3-year-old.
Okay.
Do some UK goose, but
no.
none of them are tasting sort of where we want them at the moment. But they change so often. So when they're ready.
Yeah.
Just as a brief aside, it is Halloween today, so just wanted to just comment on the amazing outfits that I can see some of you sporting in the video. So thank you for joining in a little bit of seasonality and bringing a little bit of festival party vibe. Much appreciated. I don't have a Halloween Abbeydale costume, so I've just gone for a spider. Right.
Ooh, a ghost.
Right, so first year, Cool Ship release. As Jim said, it was live brewed at the festival last year. I think I can spot a couple of people on here who may have been present at the filling of the Cool Ship. Yeah, do you want to, Brett, Jim, do you want to talk a little bit about how it came about and what the mobile Cool Ship is, and what you've been doing with the project?
I can start with what the mobile coolship is. We had a company called Gravity make that up for us a couple of years ago now. It was a conversation me and the owner had before I even started working for London Beer Factory. A dream he had was to take the coolship around the UK, sort of capturing native yeast bacteria and fermenting it in London, and sort of grabbing the microclimate from each corner of the UK. So we had it made 2 years ago, and we had used it only twice before we went to Sheffield with it. That was in London and at Wilderness in Wales. And we've used it 5 times since then. So yeah, we haven't used it a lot. So the conditions have to be perfect because it's outside, and it's on the back of a pickup truck usually. The only time we've used it not on the back of the pickup is at Abbeydale. But yeah, it fits perfectly on the back of a Hilux, and we usually drive to another brewery, brew some wort, and then drive somewhere else and open it up for the night. Usually camp, invite the other brewers, and have a nice night. So yeah, it's pretty early on in that project, but you guys invited us. I don't remember how it happened actually. I just remember being told by our marketing manager James that was an opportunity to do that, and I just like, yep, let's go. Load up the pickup. Let's go.
So I think originally I'd seen the project as part of the crowdfunder, and I'd put money into the crowdfunder. Somewhere I've got a cap. But I think from there it was like, well, we may as well try and work together, and whether that was through probably Twitter, with whoever operates the Twitter account at the time, and going from there. But again, it made complete sense. I wanted to do a bit more with the festival last year and kind of do something that was a little bit more open and a bit more about the brewing rather than just sat around drinking the beer, which is all well and good, but try and do a bit more with it. So yeah, it was great to have the coolship up and brew something for it. But the constraints of our brew kit and the volume limit of the coolship meant that we ended up having to make a lot of worts. So the coolship can only hold, is it 750 litres?
Right, yeah.
So the smallest volume of wort that we can produce is 3 times that amount. So we ended up having to, which isn't a problem. So we ended up making 1,600 litres of wort that we, what did we put in it? Obviously, I'm fully read up and can remember everything about this beer, but I am just checking the allergens. So barley, wheat, rye, and some aged hops. So normally when you're making long aged beers, whether they're traditionally made in Belgium, they'll be done through turbid mashing and complicated mash steps that take 4 hours to produce just wort into a kettle. And all you're aiming for is kind of lots of sugar out of the grain, but also complexity of the wort profile. So instead of having a 3-hour-long process that our brew kit doesn't really fit to, we opted for a really short mash stand. It was about 15 minutes, I think, mash stand at really high. So normally when we're brewing beers, normal beers will be letting the mash stand, letting enzymes break down sugars to make simple fermentable wort, and that will happen over a period of about an hour, and at a lower temperature. So at higher temperatures, enzymes don't work as well. So we would, aimed at the top end of the spectrum at 71 degrees, to get as much complexity in the wort as possible, so that as we ferment slowly over the year or so, there's a lot more for the potential yeast and bacteria that have got into the wort naturally from being cooled and chilled overnight to so there's something for those yeast and bacteria to eat and consume, and so that was the kind of that was the aim, is to make something that's difficult for yeasts and Saccharomyces strains, but really good for Brett's over the time. Yeah.
So how's everyone getting on with the beer? I'm seeing, are you all hungry? Because I'm seeing a lot of snack suggestions coming up in the tasting notes.
There's a lot of pub snacks.
Yeah.
Because we can't be in a pub.
So I think acidic and vinegary, but not in a bad way, is the main thing that's coming through in the chat. Which, now that somebody said blue discos, I would never have got that myself, but now you've said it, I'm kind of picking up on it.
Yeah. It's malty and vinegary in a good way. And so and then after we've created the wort, we'll boil as we normally would boil for an hour or so. And then we were using, I think, 2015 hops, so aged hops, which are they're a traditional way of using hops on the continent through making gers and lambics. And they just have a softer hop character, but that happens through degradation of the alpha acids that you normally get that make beer bitter. And so those kind of dying off allows a little bit more for lactobacillus, which is normally hindered by hops. So these things kind of all work together, but still have a nice little bit of a hop character and a nice little bit of balance, but not too much. Then left it in the cool ship overnight. And well, we filled it with the group of people who were there for the live brew. So we filled it on the day with around 20 odd people, with Matt Curtis and some more of the team from London Big Beer Factory, along with Brett. And then it went into barrels the next morning.
Yeah. Question about the aim for carbonation.
So currently the carbonation is quite low on this. The intention is, we've only done a small number of bottles, but the intention is to kind of slightly pick up a little bit. But again, I don't think it's too much of an issue that the carbonation is quite low on this. On the next two, the carb is higher, but they're a slightly different kind of expression of the base work more than anything else.
Yeah, I hope everyone's enjoying it so far. I think while we're all sipping on this one, Brett, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you guys have been up to over the past few months, and how you've found 2020 so far, what kind of beers you've had coming out, and exciting things you might have in the pipeline?
Yeah, 2020 has been good for production, to be honest. We are a blendery pub, so from Monday to Wednesday, we operate as a production space, and at Thursday, 4 p.m, the pub opens until Sunday night. So we usually had 3 days to do things, and then as soon as lockdown started, we found we could spread out and do as much as we wanted. So for a few months, we made sure all the barrels were full, and sort of because we filled the first barrels almost 2 years ago, everything was sort of coming up to a good point. So I think the beers that we brought last year were all really young, and some of them had been kettle soured and then were Brett primary kind of beers, but now the sort of longer term aged beers were coming up to maturity. So, and we also got 4 fruit tanks. So we've done, I think we've just started releasing the fruit beers, but we've done 12 fruit beers in the last few months, a few wine beers, and we've sort of released our like house blends, and we've released 4 or 5 beers in the last month or so, and we've got 3 to 4 beers a month sort of coming now, as the barrel project's sort of maturing. But yeah, fruit beers on the horizon, and the wine beers just after that, which I'm really excited for. But yeah, 2020 has been good for production, but not good for the pub.
Yeah, no, there's sounds like there's some really exciting things coming out there. I know the fruited ones that I've tried already have all been superb. So definitely be on the lookout for those. I think the Barrel Project was one of the last places we went, really, wasn't it? Before wave one of all of this kicked off down in London for my birthday. And if anybody hasn't been, obviously not right now, but when it's safe to do so, the Barrel Project's on Bermondsey Beer Mile. That's right, isn't it, Brett? And
yeah, we're right on the edge with Southwark and Ansbach and Hob Day.
And yeah, really, really nice space, fantastic tap selection. So definitely recommended to visit when we're all allowed to go to the pub again.
Sometime in 2023, I think.
How's everyone getting on? Is anybody going to be upset and feel really rushed if we crack open beer number 2? Does anybody want a few more minutes? Have any questions about the Cool Ship one? Something like that, or should we crack open number 2?
So we wrap this. Just talk about barrels for this while we just quickly. So after we leave overnight, you recirculate the wort because yeast kind of sits on top of the wort and it doesn't really kind of mix fully down into the entirety of the wort. So at that point, you recirculate for a little bit and just that's running through a pump and before we pumped it into barrels. We were using some second use by us French oak that were relatively neutral, but had some mixed ferment before, but had a good rinse out of the trub, sedimented trub. And then we wait for fermentation to happen, which I think for this happened relatively quickly. We got fermentation in.
Yeah, I think the next week you text me a photo of the crossing popping out. Yeah,
so pretty pleased, and especially September time, which is when we were trying to inoculate this. It's very early in the season. I think it's earlier in the season than normal, but we were
out of season. Yeah.
We were fortunate that night that it was colder. It was one of the coldest nights of the month, so it dropped really nicely down from high 80s down to 24 or 23, which is a good starting temperature for fermentations anyway. So yeah, it kind of works quite happily, and we didn't introduce any pathogen or bad time.
A couple of compliments coming in, Brett, for the, I'm probably going to butcher this name, I'm really sorry. Tokolosh?
Tokolosh, yeah. It's a mythical creature in Zulu mythology.
Oh, cool.
Which we did a collaboration with a brewery called Little Monster, and that's what Tokolosh is. It's a little creature, and he's the owner of that brewery. He's South African like myself, so I thought that was a cool little name. But yeah, I didn't know if anyone could pronounce it, and my answer is probably no.
Sorry. Wasn't too far off. So ready to open Brett's Saison?
Yeah.
Just while we're all finishing off and pouring second beer, we're going for Brett's Saison next for anybody that missed that a little earlier. There's another question for you, Brett, from Matt, who runs Gluten Free Pint, who is saying he believes that London Beer Factory have done a couple of gluten-free beers in the past, and he's wondering if you have plans to do any more, or if you use Clarex in any of your other beers.
Matt, we did some gluten-free lagers. One called Surfacing, I think, is the last one we did, and we, as a company, came to decision to stop making lagers at our brewery, because the water doesn't. We don't think we can make a great lager at our brewery because of the water and because of the tanks that we have, because of our processes. They're more suitable to ales, so we don't want to make any lagers. We haven't really discussed doing gluten-free pale ale or IPA. But that's something we should probably talk about. We should do that. And we haven't used Clarex in any of our other beers, but that's something we should definitely think about, though.
Okay, cheers. If you do, please do let me know. I'd like to be one of the first to hear.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, we'll get on that. Actually, that's a good idea.
Cool.
And so these all do have Clarex in, but again, as we kind of chatted last night, Matt, that's the part of our process, anyways, that we put in most of our beers. But that's just a matter of course, more than anything. So for the we had the breaded saison. We use, so after we'd split 750 kilos of 750 litres of wort into the cool ship, the rest of it was pumped straight into a tank, an FE for its primary fermentation before we racked it off for conditioning. It was the second crop of our house saison, so we've got a blend of saison yeasts, which are a mixture of kind of relatively highly attenuative Saccharomyces, standard yeast strains, some Brett strains, and a little bit of lactobacillus that's we've kind of grown and added to over time, and that's starting to develop as we grow, as it grows. So I tend to go back. I tend to keep a bottle of beers from previous releases that I'm happy with, and then I'll regrow up from there to then repitch into new into the next batch of beer that we're using for the saison. So primary fermented, quite warm, open fermented. So we left the lid off, so that kind of lets a lot of the volatile, all the volatile aromas out of the top into the air rather than holding them into the beer. Fermented for about 7 days, maybe less. That we then rack that into a tank for the 10 months, but with an additional pitch of our house Brettanomyces blend, which is a blend of 12 to 15 different Brett strains, and let it sit and chunter away happily next to the steam generator until we packaged it.
Yeah, I think this one's quite distinct from the cool ship as well. It smells very different. I think it's slightly softer.
It doesn't have any of the tannins that the wood character of the cool ship and of the red wine. Both of them have wood contacts. This has got none. But again, it's more of a study in the difference that yeast can make on the same base work. Over the years, it's kind of gone through phases of being really over the months. It's had quite a lot of acid down to where it is now. It's quite a tempered amount of acid. I think we did say what the pH was. At bottling, the pH was 2.97, which is really, really low, but it doesn't taste that much. And I think that's just the acids that are present don't taste particularly acidic. I think that's just a case of this. It's not got too much acetic acid, or any acetic acid for my taste. Just got nice little soft round bits. What does everyone else think?
Oh, somebody's described it as a happy saison. I love that. And yeah, somebody else picking up a little bit of banana. Few esters in there. While everybody's kind of musing over this one and sipping away, feel free to keep obviously popping your thoughts in there. But as we've got our designer James Murphy here, just thought I'd ask James to say a little bit about the Funk Dungeon design. I think this is quite a strong sort of separate part of the branding that we do, but obviously it fits alongside a lot of our other beers too. It's developed quite a bit in the couple of years that we've been doing the project. So yeah, just if you don't mind just saying a bit about how it's developed, James, and kind of the inspiration behind it, and yeah, teach us about our little skeleton.
Yeah, so the Funk Dungeon range came out of the Brewers Emporium range, but as you probably tell, the name Funk Dungeon probably doesn't sit alongside a lot of the ecclesiastic names that we've got in that range, such as a Deliverance, Heathen, Heresy. So it was something that I felt would take us a little further away, and just because of the, how can I put it, the labour of love and the kind of special nature of the Funk Dungeon and the work that goes into it, I felt like it needed to stand out from the rest of the range, but also sit alongside it if it was on any shelves in a bottle shop. The word funk, I would probably hazard a guess that for most people, the colour purple would probably lend itself to the word funk if anybody was to kind of ask to name a colour for that. So purple was something that we hadn't used within the range, and it kind of helped me distinguish the beer from any other. I think somebody mentioned within the brewery that it would be good to have some skeletons in some of the images. It's something that I do quite often in some of my own personal work and other things that I've done in the past. But this was the only time where I've really been able to kind of go to town and put some character into a skeleton. And hence we have our Skelly character, our protagonist, in the kind of mini stories that we've tried to put together as the series has grown, with the different beers that Jim has put out himself, as well as the collaborations that you're drinking today. Started off with the idea of them raising from his grave, essentially, or his funk dungeon, coming out and having a different life, which was quite interesting. Normally got a lot of static objects within our designs for our beers. So it was nice to have a little bit of a background and give some as we go on, and it allows us to expand the range a little bit. So it's been really fun, particularly the one-off Funk Dungeon beers such as Rise from the Grave, Slam Dunk the Funk, and Funk in Drublick. They've benefited from us being a bit more adventurous with our designs as well. I don't know if Louis is still around on this call, but he should take a lot of credit for how our designs are looking. Louis had pushed forward with some of his designs using layers of transparency in his some of the collaboration beers that he's done with us, and he lent us some advice on how to use that method in the Funk Dungeon beer. So I really do appreciate Louis' help. That's been really good, and I think we've been able to make our beer stand out on shelves in either bars or in bottle shops, using the transparency and allowing that the shininess of the can, the aluminium can, to shine through, hopefully setting our beers apart. So it's been really fun. Who knows where it will actually go, but I have a lot of enjoyment of coming up with these ideas, trying to give something back to Jim that he'd be proud to see on his beers as well. It's always good to work with brewers and find out what they think and what they feel about the beer, rather than me just taking the design, a couple of keywords, and kind of running off with it and possibly being nowhere near what their intentions were. A lot of fun as well with regards to the beers has been putting like little Easter egg type things in. So a nod to some of the features that Jim will see in his Funk Dungeon. I believe Laura asked some of the participants last night to try and find the Mind Your Head symbol. So in every single beer that we put out in the individual Funk Dungeon beers, there's been Mind Your Head on it. Not these bottles, unfortunately, because they were done in the Cool Ship, so they weren't done in the Funk Dungeon. But the beers like Funk in Drublick, the recent Through the Sticks, if you've had the fortunate opportunity to drink that yet, they've all got little Easter eggs and little nods to the brewery and the background to the Funk Dungeon as well. So hopefully there's plenty to come with that. I think Jim may have mentioned or may mention some of the ideas that he may have got coming up. I'm obviously working on them. I like to think that these designs are a lot more detailed than the other Brewers Emporium ones and the cask beers that I do for the brewery. So they do take a little while, but it allows me to work with Jim and work with Laura and other people in the brewery and come up with something that we think is quite special.
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing that I really like about the design for the individual beers as well is it's almost cyclical, isn't it? Like sometimes we will have a name before we even have a beer. I think Rise from the Grave was kind of, the name came first, decided it could be a beer with rye in it, and then that kind of fitted for a concept for James to work with of the Skelly literally rising. Then there's been others where kind of the artwork ideas being set in motion first, and that's
that's true.
Helped to trigger the name and the beer, and then others where we've had a beer and kind of had to come up with a concept and a name to go with it.
Yes.
So, but that's kind of a really nice process for us all to work with. I think that it is very much a team creative process.
Yeah, definitely. The Through the Sticks, again, I don't know if you mentioned this with the first pouring of it last night, but I felt that Through the Sticks was probably the biggest team effort that any beer has gone through whilst I've been working in the brewery. I think about 7 to 8 different people had some sort of part in naming a beer that only has 3 names in it. 3 words, sorry, which just, it would probably sound ridiculous overall, but we wanted to make, as with everything that I do, and particularly with this range that Jim is in charge of, we want to make sure that it fits and it does the beer justice. So Through the Sticks came from a lot of different suggestions. I don't know if you can remember it more clearly, Laura, how we came about with Through the Sticks as a name.
Yeah, we were playing around with the kind of camp concept and being in the woods, and I think Lost in the Woods was an early suggestion, and then I realised it's a song from Frozen, and that didn't quite fit with the vibe that we were going for. Obviously, all the ingredients that were there were things we were trying to play around with. A lot of the names have had some kind of musical connection, so we were trying to link that in. Some of them have been a little bit kind of, they've had a bit of a pun in there or a bit of a play on words. But then the eventual name, and sorry to anybody that was here yesterday that's heard a bit of this story, but I think there's a lot of new faces as well tonight. So the eventual name came from the song 96 Quite Bitter Beans by CKY, which was, hope you don't mind me saying, it was Fran's suggestion, James as well, who's also there at the bottom, but then kind of twisted it to make it fit with the kind of rosemary as well. And I think it took us a while, and it gave us a lot of headaches, but I think it worked really well in the end. It really suits the
Yeah,
beer.
Definitely. That's the idea. We want the name to help the design evoke something. And one of the messages that either Katie or Tom, or Katie and Tom together, have said about the imagining that the skelly dude has got into a cauldron and his skin has melted off. I think that's a really good idea and a really good way of looking at it, because we didn't start off with a human character at first. We had one of the, it was in Craig New England IPA, where we actually made some of the characters human, which was a little bit different, rather than just doing the same thing for a different beer. But I really like the idea of him getting in the cauldron and kind of like his skin melting off. That's a good idea. Whereas the original idea was for him just sitting in something warm and bubbly, and a cauldron kind of made perfect sense. And I think that makes perfect sense on a day like Halloween. And with regards to these bottles, it was really cool to be able to get him in the cool ship, because unfortunately when Brett came up to Sheffield with the cool ship last year, I wasn't able to make Funkfest in 2019, so I had to use a lot of Laura's photographs from the event to get a true idea of what the cool ship actually looks like. I think I had to look at some of London Beer Factory's photos as well to try and make sure that I was doing it justice, wasn't drawing something completely different. So if you Google cool ship, you get obviously loads of different things on Google Images. So that was quite good, and obviously that's something that we wanted to do to make sure that this beer, in particular the ones that you've got in your hands this evening, are different to the Funk Dungeon ones that we normally put out, as well as the more regular or more let's say standard, for want of a better term, Jim. Funk Dungeon's like the Hop Bretta series. So I think we've got 3 arms of the Funk Dungeon series, the way I see it, and we want everyone to be special. And obviously these bottles, I think they've come out really well, and it's nice to see people drinking them. And hopefully, again, Laura, I apologise if you've spoken about this a number of times with some people, but it was really fun last year introducing the international goat unit, the Skelly goats that we've started to put on the Funk Dungeon beers now, which I think we should continue with if we haven't already decided that, but particularly for Funk Fest.
There's two shout outs in the chat, James, for more goats, please. So
completely fine with me.
Sneaking them in everywhere.
Yeah.
I was very excited about the goat stickers when they came through.
Yeah.
Again, it's something different.
Yeah. Well, it's not a funk. Something we were going to do as part of the Funk Fest Fringe, although who knows if this is going to be allowed to happen, is Jim's supposed to be getting a tattoo of the Skelly goat next week.
Definitely should.
So, yeah, fingers crossed that goes ahead. But
you should get one too.
I'll get one too.
That's another Fringe event is me getting tattooed.
And Martin's asked about Slam Dunk Da Funk, and that being one where the art determined the name, and I think that was one. What was that?
No.
Was that the name came first?
The name definitely came first because I had to take myself back to playing basketball at school to work out what happens when people play basketball, just to make sure the position.
Oh.
Right, so yeah, that was definitely a name that was given to me, and obviously we made the artwork work on that one. So yeah, good question, Martin. Having mentioned that sometimes it's one way or the other, and that was definitely named because it works. It's such a good name. Obviously, no reason not to use it. Just making sure the artwork fit.
That would have been Melissa Cole, all her fault for.
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
Bringing in the 90s boy band 5 reference.
Yeah. So that's one of the nods.
Good road of having all my death metal references, and then now we've got 5.
just very quickly before we see how we're all getting on with this beer and get the next question. Just on the music thing, hopefully you all spotted in your email that Jim's put a very random Spotify playlist together for this weekend as well, which has all of the songs that have kind of inspired the beers or that appear to have been inspirations behind the beers, as well as just funky tunes. So feel free to give that a listen. How's everyone getting on with the bread saison? Ours is nearly gone, but I'm conscious that we're sharing, and some of you might obviously don't feel like you need to keep up if you're a little bit behind. But if we're ready to just do the next question, then possibly crack the next one open. Joseph has mentioned that he knows that both at Abbeydale and London Beer Factory have used wild ingredients. So just wondering about how they've been foraged, how we got the amount that was required, and how it affected the process.
I can talk about our foraging. I think the only adjunct we've used completely properly foraged is elderflower, which we did this year, besides wild yeast, which we've used a lot of. We've done a lot of spontaneous fermentation with apples, grapes, and our new sort of house wild culture is all foraged from the Greater London area. But we got some, my colleague Braden grabbed elderflower from, I think it was Hackney Marshes in the morning. You're supposed to get elderflower first thing in the morning before the pollen's dried out. And we had the beer ready to go. We had selected, it was a single barrel. We selected that barrel, and it was in one of our sort of packaging tanks, and we have 2 of them. What we do is when we add an ingredient like elderflower, we've done it with other herbs, other spices, is we fill a 50-litre keg. We'll clean a 50-litre keg, sterilize it, add the ingredient, in this case elderflower, purge it with CO2, so it's a nice environment and there's no oxygen, and then we'll transfer from one tank to the other through a 50-litre keg with CO2. So we'll push that beer through really slowly into the other tank, taste it. If we want some more extraction, we'll put it straight back through, and we'll just sort of yo-yo between the two. With the elderflower, we just did it once, and we bottled it immediately, and released it as quickly as we could to sort of capture that really bright elderflower note. And we did that again the next day, and we did a steep and put it back in barrel, because some lambic producers have been using elderflower long term, so they'll do a steep and then leave it in wood for 6 months, but we wanted to see the difference. So in this case, we know what it tastes like fresh and how quickly that drops off, and we'll know, sort of we'll package the next one soonish, and we'll find out what that steep does 6 months in wood before we package. But yeah, that's the only thing we've properly foraged, would be elderflower and yeast.
So we've done a few times. We've done with nettles, and we did pineapple weeds the weekend before last. Yeah, we've had it, and you don't know the impact that this ingredient is going to have, because there's no standardization on a weed that you pick up from the side of a path. You just get the flavor that you get, and then you go from there, I think, is how we've found to do it, in a similar way that Brett's saying, that the kind of passing through, and then you can always add. The difficult thing is then if you put far too much in, then you've got to then blend back and trying to reduce that flavor. So in fact, on both of the beers that we've done, that we've actually foraged, so I got the exact amount of 6 malt sacks full, potentially, of relatively old nettles that went all in the hot back, all hot side. So there was like hot extraction of all the kind of the flavor sides of all the flavors of it was all done through hot extraction. But we were using late season nettles. So when you're making, say, a nettle soup, you generally use the small, fresh spring, soft bits of fresh growth, whereas we were using like late season stuff, but we're aiming for like a really like deep flavor on that. So and then we were blending it with a beer that was going to sit in barrels for 6 months. So that's also going to round out all the potential flavor that and so that's what we're doing with this pineapple weed, which is the competition winner, the homebrew competition winner from last year. We were planning on brewing it. James, who is also on the chat. So yeah, when we were making that, we were planning on making it early this year, and then lockdown happened, and then we could have had fresh, and instead we ended up just filling James's freezer up with pineapple weed to go with my token amount, which is here, which is going to go into, she's going into barrels tomorrow, or going into the beer, which is now in barrels for tomorrow, and then we'll leave it to age, round out, and it might be that in March time it needs some more, might need a hit, but it also might have plenty of flavour. It's one of those, you don't know, because we don't brew with these kind of ingredients very often, you don't know how they're going to come out until you've tried brewing with them. You don't know how much is too much. So you go with some and then you build from there.
Yeah, my sort of strategy is, I think in 10 years' time, I'll know exactly how much of something to use. And right now we're just experimenting. We don't need to be getting perfect right now, but our two options are to go hot side, as Jim's talking about with the nettles, is use it in the boil and know that there's a lot of aging and a lot of loss of that flavor and aroma, or use it cold side. But what you can do is use more than you think and let time do the rest, or go conservative and know that next time you need to know more, you need to use more.
I think one of the handy resources on things like this, if you're trying to make these beers at home, generally there's a Milk the Funk, which is an online community, a Facebook group, and a wiki page that have got. It started off with mainly a group of Americans but that's now kind of a group of 20,000 members on Facebook, I think. So it's a huge group of people that have been making these beers for 25 years using forage things, and they have an outline of herbs and spices or fruits or stuff and what you need to add in terms of grams per litre, or what they've found as their best way of adding these ingredients. So there's a good place for outline, but really it's just
links in the chat.
And the links in the chat. So, but also just try it. Yeah, just add them.
So, do you want to crack this open?
Yeah. So we're on to the red wine barrel aged saison.
Yeah, this is as we mentioned earlier, this one does have a bit more carbonation. Somebody has had sorry about that, Chris, if it's been a little lively. Ours has behaved. So hopefully there aren't too many that are too fizzy.
So for all the bottling, I'm pretty new to it. I've done bits of homebrew stuff, but commercial releases of bottles is new to me. But this was a blend of 2 barrels. One we had to dump because it was too much acetic acid, even for me. It was just too much like drinking vinegar, and so that went down the drain. But that's also part of the process. Is you're going to have to dump stuff when you put stuff in barrel. There will be things because beer's just and the yeast and bacteria are alive, and wood can be so potentially temperamental. You don't know how much oxygen's getting in through the barrel stage. You don't know. Or if there's been a little bit too much agitation, someone's knocked the barrel, it's going to increase the amount of oxygen that's getting into the beer, and then at that point you're going to increase the amount of acid potential later down the line. And so we ended up having to dump one. Yeah, and so there was a few hundred litres 400 litres or so of this that we packaged. And
gotta get the balsamic vinegar right.
So yeah, we didn't pitch with any additional yeasts other than the starting yeast. So we pitched with a house saison and then racked into barrel and left and the barrel racks next to the cool shipped barrels. Yeah. Does everyone think other than lively?
Yeah, sorry about that. I think ours poured okay. I can see a couple of people commenting that they're lively. I can only think that because we were only able to send them out, obviously with a few days' notice, they've not quite had the resting time that these beers would more commonly be afforded. So hopefully they're all okay. I think for me personally, this is my favourite of the 3. I think you're getting a nice little kind of oaky, vinous kind of finish in there, without it being too predominantly red wine based. But yeah, seems that one's going down okay so far. So that's great. I think just to if we just touch a little bit on the kind of beers that we've got coming up. Obviously, these are our newest releases from the Funk Dungeon, which have been a year and a month in the making. We've got a few bits and bobs in barrel, but if we go to Brett first, is there anything you've got coming up from the barrel project that you're particularly excited by?
We've got we've got a few coming out pretty soon. One that I'm really excited about is called Mezcal Margarita, which is just using our our mixed culture of some saison strains, Brett Lactopedia, sort of house culture that we propagated and used for a while. We put that into heavy toasted barrels. So we got these, all our barrels are reconditioned, retoasted. We have some heavy toast barrels. We put it in there and they ended up being really smoky. So we thought, mezcal, we like mezcal, let's get some agave syrup. So we got enough to make up 10 gravity points, just sort of 20% of the fermentable sugar. And so that has agave syrup and it kind of has that mezcal sort of tequila-y flavor. And then right before, like I said, with the elderflower, we used lime zest and smoked chipotle chilies and sort of made a sort of margarita, mezcal margarita beer. Package that's ready soon. We've got a, what else do we have coming out? We've got the fruit beers. We've got raspberry coming out, second use raspberry, which is really nice. Hibiscus wild ale used with forage yeast. We've got the new Brett IPA, which is we named after goats. I can't remember what this one's called, but every Brett IPA is a goat subspecies or whatever you say for that. But I think we have the hibiscus, the mezcal, and then for the fruit beers, we've got raspberry coming out, blackberry, blueberry, damson. We've got the Riesling, the Pinot Noir, and then the new Dawn and Dusk. So yeah, we've got a lot coming out and our Christmas beer is really nice. It's a high gravity dark beer, sort of a wild stout, 11% that we've aged on figs, and we added cinnamon and orange peel just before bottling. So that should hopefully be ready for Christmas.
They all sound delicious.
Yeah, sound amazing.
Very exciting. The next thing that we've got coming up is we've got another Unbeliever, which is our slightly more less complex sour series, which is a somewhat festive beer, which is winterberry, red currant and cranberry. So that's in the pipeline. And then in terms of Funk Dungeon beers, we've mentioned the pineapple weed beer already, which we're all really excited about. Do you want to?
Hopefully next year we should be early next year we should be hopefully releasing our Sheffield Red, which is like a dark sour red ale that kind of has that we've had aging in barrel. Some of it's been in barrel for now 3 years at least, and we brewed another batch at the beginning of lockdown, and that's been stainless for a while, and that's currently in barrel. So it sat in stainless for about 6 months, and now when barrel stock opened up, we're able to rack it in barrel. So it's been finished in some wine casks. Then at that point, at some point early next year, we should be blending and releasing, because it's for the 25th anniversary of the brewery. So we're going to try and have some special releases for next year of some of our kind of core beers and some reinterpretations of those, as well as some good, interesting aged beers that we've had sat for a long time.
Hopefully the return of in fact, it might have been the first full Funk Dungeon release, which was a Brett Tangerine beer, which was really popular at the time as well. Yeah,
made with Saccharomyces twas, so not.
It was a Brett at the time.
Yeah.
The Pluto of Bretts.
Yeah. And that was just a single hops, just Citra, lots of tangerine or orange peel, and the Sac Trois. So hopefully that should be out at some point soon, or should be brewing at some point soon. And then there's lots of things in the works so one of the other beers that we released was over for this weekend, not in this box, but was a Spontaneous Creek, which is like a spontaneously fermented like cherry saison, but that's intended to then blend with some barrel stock that we've already got, in a similar vein to the way that we released the first one of these cans, which was the Rise From Your Grave. So yeah, I'll need to go and find another Altered Beast reference for that.
I mean, James, do you want to just quickly say a few words about what you've got in mind for the upcoming designs for some of those as well? Because we've got some really exciting things on the horizon with that too.
Yeah, definitely. The Sheffield Red is something that I'm really looking forward to getting stuck into. I myself am from Leeds, but having worked with the brewery for a number of years now, it's good to get to know a new city, which is obviously only about 30 miles down the road. And with the Sheffield Red, we're looking to implement some elements of Sheffield history, some which may not be known to Sheffield residents themselves, but with these cans hopefully going far and wide now, it'll be really good to put some interesting elements of Sheffield history into these designs. So that'll be good. Obviously, we're going to throw some goats in, seeing as though that is seen as a nice element of our design. But obviously, I'll refer to Jim and Laura as to when and where we should use goats, just in case I'm not just throwing them in beers that have no goaty element whatsoever.
No, everywhere. Everywhere. Moonshine can labels. Goats, please.
That sounds like a beer name for the future. Goats everywhere. But yeah, so that's really good. I do forget the way that you referred to the beer, but the way the one that I've been working on for quite a while now was one that we'd kind of given the loose name of Baseball Furies, and that's something that I've been working on. Another sporty type of design, but obviously with the skeletons, I think it gives it a very dark edge. And again, it allows us to go kind of a little bit wild with the design and something that's completely different and has a little bit more depth and background to it. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea, Tom. So yeah, I'll have a go at that. I've been working on it a while, but it's not finished yet, just because there's so much detail to it. But there's plenty of scope to. When we send the designs back to the team, Jim and Laura in particular, and if anything kind of springs to mind, I'm more than happy to take on board suggestions and see where it goes up until the point or the deadline in which we need to get the can label sent off to the printers. But yeah, it's looking good. The pineapple weed, I will admit I've not started on that yet. We've only had brief conversations, but again, that'll be quite interesting. And yeah, hopefully just develop the designs, and hopefully you guys who are buying them, they stand out on the shelves in the shops, and they allow the beers to stand up with kind of other contemporary beers of their ilk.
Definitely. Oh, thanks very much, James.
No worries, thank you.
I think, how's everyone? There's a few people who were, when we first opened the red wine saison, popping a couple of comments in. I think, if anybody's got any more specific questions for Jim, Brett, or James, or any of us, please carry on popping them in. But I think we've kind of come to the sort of suitable ending of going through these 3 beers and what we're going to do. So I'll open it up a little more widely. Katie and Tom are asking if the pineapple weed beer is the competition winning beer from Funkfest last year, and it is indeed brewed with James Newman, who is on the chat as well. So yeah, that got brewed 2 weeks ago. Yeah, so that's on the go.
Yeah.
Obviously, Katie was one of the other judges on the homebrew day as well. So tasted the original iteration of that, a bottle of which did ceremoniously go into the wort of the big brew. So yeah, very excited about that one. But yeah, really hope you've all enjoyed the beers this evening and are enjoying drinking along with a few other funky beverages over the rest of the weekend. Please keep chatting, sharing what you're drinking or eating. We've had some kimchi today, so we've tried to spread the fermented love around a little bit more as well. Anybody that's kind of ready to head off, thank you very much for coming. Feel free to join on the brewery tour on Facebook at 11 o'clock in the morning. So yeah, anybody that needs to hop off, please feel free and thank you. Otherwise, I'm just going to open it up, and if anybody wants to stay share another beer with us, you're more than welcome. But yeah, and thank you very much to James and to Brett as well for joining us from very far away.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
So yeah, very much appreciated, and
Thanks,
hope
Laura.
we'll see you all soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.